Hello everyone and welcome to Eternalism in a Nutshell. My name is David and the title of this episode is The Rock of Reality, Change and Permanence. Part 1, Framework. This is episode 14. Again, I will be presenting this material in two parts, with Part 1 presenting the theoretical framework and Part 2 the praxis, or practical application of this material to cultural Marxism and woke activism. With that said, let's now turn to Part 1, the framework. In Part 1, we will establish the framework of our discussion by first noting that the gospel rests upon the rock of reality, a reality with two core attributes, change and permanence, with permanence as foundational and change derivative, and not the other way around. This is a pivotal philosophical and practical issue because it is by making permanence foundational and change derivative that you build your house, church, kingdom, and philosophy on the rock of reality. Those, however, who foolishly make hope and change foundational and permanence derivative are building their houses on the shifting sand of cultural relativism, postmodern skepticism, and woke activism, and have doomed themselves from the very get-go, for such a house cannot stand. We have then two radically different social and ontological frameworks, and by ontology, I am simply referring to a branch of metaphysics or philosophy that investigates the nature of reality, such as the relationship between mind and matter, or, in this case, between change and permanence. On the one hand, then, we have a social and ontological framework wherein one's house is built on the rock of reality, with permanence as foundational and change as derivative. On the other hand, we have a radically different social and ontological framework wherein one's house is built upon the shifting sand, with change as foundational and permanence as derivative. Now, in the two previous episodes, we spoke of compliance and defiance, and now I want to add this further perspective or insight to help provide a social and ontological template for understanding what compliance and defiance consist of when we look beneath the outward appearance of things, such as we did in the previous episode wherein heteronormativity was pictured as compliance with reality and transnormativity as defiance of reality. What I want you to see now is what lies beneath the outward appearance. For instance, beneath heteronormativity, we see permanence as foundational and change as derivative, while beneath transnormativity, we see a radically different social and ontological framework wherein change is foundational and permanence is derivative. I will have a great deal more to say about this in the next episode, but for now, this will give you an idea of how compliance with and defiance of reality relate to these social and ontological issues of permanence and change. To set the stage for what is coming then, I would like to begin by giving you a better understanding of what I have in mind when I speak of this one reality, in which permanence and change take place. So let's turn to that now. As was evident in our last series of episodes, Elder Whitsoe was deeply concerned that we Latter-day Saints understand that the Church teaches that there is but one reality, one ultimate world, and that both the material and spiritual worlds are all part of this one universe. For example, consider these teachings of Elder Whitsoe, which he deliberately puts under the topical heading of the unity of the universe. Here is what he writes. The Church recognizes two worlds, the visible and the invisible. The visible or material world is the one known directly by mortal senses. The invisible world is usually spoken of as the spiritual. It is the world out of which man came upon earth, and to which he will return after death. The Church teaches that these two worlds are but manifestations of one ultimate world. It follows from this doctrine that there is but one universe, and that all experiences are but manifestations of different orders or different combinations of the contents of the one universe. In his numerous writings, Elder Witzel would return again and again to this foundational idea that there is but one universe, one nature, or one eternal reality upon which the gospel rests, and which I have referred to as the rock of reality. Consider, for example, two more references to this one universe, one nature, or one reality. In his popular book, A Rational Theology, Elder Witzel writes, "There is but one nature. All things visible or invisible belong to the one universe." Elsewhere, in a pamphlet-sized booklet on the Articles of Faith, he writes, "Life here and life hereafter are but different manifestations of one eternal reality." Clearly, then, this gospel understanding of one reality was a theme that Elder Witzel wanted the saints to understand in his day. But it's important to note that these same sentiments are being expressed in our day as well. Consider, for instance, these words of Elder Kenneth Johnson, previously of the 70, who in our day stated the following in General Conference: "It is important to understand that natural laws were not determined on the basis of popularity. They were established and rest on the rock of reality." And then there are these additional and confirming words of Elder D. Todd Christofferson, who, speaking of God's commandments, stated the following in General Conference as well, and in these words: "His commandments are the voice of reality." One can see then that if the gospel rests upon the rock of reality, to the extent that God's voice is the voice of reality speaking to us, we are dealing with a permanence that is foundational and a universal framework of one reality, from within which we all live and move and have a being, without fear of being swept away in a cosmic and ceaseless eternal flux of change. Nonetheless, when Elder Witzel states, "It follows from this doctrine that there is but one universe, and that all experiences are but manifestations of different orders or different combinations of the contents of the one universe," we might wonder what he is talking about. After all, what does Elder Witzel mean when he speaks of the different orders or different combinations of the contents of the one universe? And what do we mean when we, Latter-day Saints, declare to the world in General Conference that the gospel rests upon the rock of reality, and that God's voice is, as it were, the voice of reality? Well, let me see if I can't make these ideas a little clearer and easier to understand by examining two related but different senses in which I refer to this one reality. You will have noticed by now that under the general heading of One Reality at the top of this slide, I have an additional tagline that reads, "Eternal realities underlie the external world." So let me explain what I am referring to, beginning with these eternal realities. For in one important and foundational sense, when I refer to this one reality, I am referring to a definition of truth and reality that we are all familiar with, and which is presented to us in the 93rd section of the Doctrine and Covenants. It reads as follows: "And truth is knowledge of things as they are, and as they were, and as they are to come." This statement could be condensed to, "And truth is knowledge of reality." Another way of saying the same thing is to define reality in these terms. That is, reality is that which is, was, and always will be the same, worlds without end. Think of it this way. Imagine a collection of Lego blocks in various colors, sizes, and shapes, each contributing to the plurality of these eternal realities, and each representing the uncreated, self-existent, immutable, and non-negotiable building blocks of the universe. By non-negotiable, I want to emphasize that in this foundational and ultimate sense, reality is not a social construct and cannot be altered by God, man, or by any woke identity group, regardless of the race, sex, or gender they might happen to identify with. Once again, at this foundational level, reality simply is what it is and remains unaffected by our thoughts, feelings, or beliefs about it. Elder Witzel puts it this way: the great laws of nature are immutable, and even God cannot transcend them, and as such, the gospel is founded on tangible and eternal things and relationships, and not, I might add, upon the whims, desires, notions, or feelings of a person's individual lived experience. So think of these uncreated, self-existent, immutable, and non-negotiable eternal realities as the building blocks of the universe. Now this brings us to the other end of this tagline, which pertains to reality as the external world. In this sense, our understanding of reality is defined in these terms. Reality is that which exists independent of the mind and is what it is, regardless of what we think, believe, or feel. When we talk about an objective reality that exists outside of ourselves, we are typically referring to this external world. It is a world that exhibits both permanence and change. In this case, however, I will be referring to this aspect of this one reality as organized existence, an external world that is both mutable and negotiable, in the sense that these eternal and immutable building blocks of the universe can be arranged, organized, combined, or constructed in potentially infinite ways. However, these constructs remain limited by the identity, nature, permanence, and relationships of the underlying eternal realities, which are not subject to change. Within the varied combinations and organized constructs of this external world, the Latter-day Saint concept of God as the master builder takes precedence. Elder Witzel aptly emphasized this by stating, "This whole doctrine of eternal realities means that God is the organizer of worlds and all upon them. He is not the creator of the materials and forces of the universe, for they are eternal. He is the master builder, who uses the simple elements of nature for his purposes." Now, when we combine both aspects of this depiction, we can fully grasp the significance of the tagline, which asserts that these eternal realities underlie the external world in which we live, move, and have a being. Regardless, it is important to note that when I mention this one reality, I am often referring to either one or the other of these two distinct yet interconnected definitions. Now I would like to consolidate all the information we have just covered into a single slide. We can represent the plurality of these eternal realities, which are the self-existent, immutable, and non-negotiable aspects of this one reality, using Lego building blocks. Additionally, we can depict the ever-changing constructs of the external world, which are themselves mutable and negotiable. But notice the asterisks at the end. For while these constructs can be organized and disorganized, it is important to remember Francis Bacon's guiding principle that nature to be commanded must be obeyed. This guiding principle can be reduced to 3 words: abide and abound. We can now add permanence and change. We can associate the element of permanence with these eternal realities, while the element of change aligns with the endless constructs that exist within the external world we inhabit. It is important to note that within the context of this interplay between permanence and change, the concept of God as the master builder emerges, with man taking on the role of the apprentice. Allow me to illustrate what I mean. Here we have these eternal realities, the fundamental building blocks of the universe. Additionally, we have God as the master builder and man as the apprentice, introducing intelligent design into the equation. This intelligent design is reflected in the countless constructs we observe, such as the earth, trees, birds, vegetation, humans, animals, as well as the man-made objects like tables, chairs, and birdhouses that surrounds us within this external world we refer to as the universe. Now, by placing this permanence and change center stage, we can summarize everything discussed thus far in the following manner. The permanence of existence can be attributed to the enduring nature of these eternal realities, while the observed changes and transformations are a result of intelligent design and the dynamic relationships and configurations among them. An additional insight worth noting is that while you can have permanence without change, you cannot have change without permanence. Consider, for instance, the concept of monism, which posits that reality is made up of one or a single ultimate thing, comparable to a single Lego block. In this perspective, there exists permanence without change. In fact, from a monist standpoint, change is often seen as an illusion. However, it is important to acknowledge that with only one Lego block, a child's creativity would be severely limited, if not eliminated altogether. Nevertheless, this represents the position held by adherents of monism, a notion of permanence without change. The concept of pluralism, on the other hand, suggests that reality is made up of more than one ultimate thing, similar to numerous Lego blocks of different shapes and colors. In contrast to monism, pluralism acknowledges that change enters the picture through the potential relationships and combinations of these eternal realities. While permanence arises from these eternal realities, it is the dynamic interactions among them that potentially give rise to the diverse constructs in our external world. We see then that with a multiplicity of different shaped and colored Lego blocks, a young child is free to express his or her creativity in a myriad of ways. Monists, on the other hand, adhere to a worldview where only permanence exists without change, and so intelligence and creativity never enter the picture. In contrast, eternalists, such as we Latter-day Saints, embrace a worldview where permanence coexists with change, thanks to the pluralistic nature of these eternal realities, allowing for intelligent design and the external constructs that make up our vast universe and its seemingly endless content and constructs. This ends our discussion on change and permanence. However, before we conclude this episode, I would like to connect our exploration of change and permanence with our previous two episodes that focused on compliance and defiance. And I would like to establish this connection by referencing the teachings of Elder Whitsoe. For example, Elder Whitsoe discusses the concept of compliance with or defiance of this one reality in the following manner. Every new truth or law must be obeyed or disobeyed. The laws of the universe cannot be ignored by man, who is himself a part of the universe. Forever we must decide and choose. This choice leads to a win-lose situation, wherein it is compliance you win, defiance you lose. On the other hand, we can also use Elder Whitsoe's teachings to consider the aspects of permanence and change in relation to this one reality. For example, Elder Whitsoe emphasizes the following. A religion built upon change is unsafe. It rests upon sand. Therefore, the storms of life may destroy it. A safe religion must be built upon the rock of certainty, permanence, and invariability. His message conveys that, in the context of this one reality, permanence holds a foundational role, while change is a derivative, rather than the other way around. Let us conclude, then, with these words of Elder Whitsoe as well. For he writes, "The gospel is founded on tangible and eternal things and relationships. In religion, thinkers must have their feet upon the ground. And by that he means they must have their feet upon the rock of reality." Thank you for watching. Push the like button if you enjoyed this episode, and be sure to push the subscribe button. Until next time, consider the gravity of these perilous times, and remember that our children and grandchildren are depending on us to get this right, and to leave them a world wherein they at least have a fighting chance.